Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're taking a look at Shakespeare's Macbeth, but not in the way you might expect. We're going to reframe this whole thing as a cautionary tale, a story about ambition, architecture, and the catastrophic collapse of a man who tried to build a kingdom on a foundation of blood.
So, let's just dive right into this idea. Forget the foggy Scottish moors for a minute and just imagine Macbeth as this incredibly ambitious architect. He gets handed a blueprint for the ultimate structure, a tower of absolute power. The only question is, what's he going to build it with?
All right, so every project has to start with a plan, right? Well, Macbeth's architectural plans, they get delivered by three, let's say, unusual and very persuasive consultants. So picture this. On some stormy heath, three witches basically lay out a three-phase construction plan for him. Phase 1, becoming Thane of Glamis, he's already there. But then, almost immediately, he gets news he's been made Thane of Cawdor. And boom, just like that, Phase 2 is a reality. Suddenly, this blueprint looks absolutely flawless. But there's always a catch. This blueprint comes with a huge warning label. See, these instruments of darkness, they hook you with little easy truths. They win you over with the small stuff to make you buy into the biggest, most dangerous promises. It is a super tempting but incredibly treacherous foundation for everything that's about to happen. Now, any great structure, anything that's meant to last, it needs a solid foundation. But our architect, Macbeth, and his lead partner, Lady Macbeth, well, they make a pretty fateful decision. They choose to build on something way, way more unstable. And this right here, this really captures the choice he's facing. On one side, you've got the solid ground, tradition, loyalty, morality. But on the other side, there's the shortcut, the fast and dirty materials, ambition, violence, and guilt. He basically chooses to build his dream on quicksand. And his partner in all of this, Lady Macbeth, she is absolutely ruthless. She looks at his kindness and sees it as a structural weakness. She's literally calling on dark spirits to harden her up, pushing him to embrace these brutal new building materials and, hide his violent plans behind a nice, friendly smile. And that's it. The choice is made. The very first stone that gets laid for this new Tower of Power is the murder of the rightful king. It is a bloody cornerstone, and it completely cements the entire structure's corrupt and unstable foundation from the very beginning. So let's see how this all plays out, because as you can imagine, once you start building with bloody stones on a foundation of quicksand, you can't just stop. You have to keep adding more weight, more violence, just to try and keep the whole thing from sinking into ruin. To try and secure his shaky tower, Macbeth's project just spirals. He adds another bloody stone by having his friend Banquo murdered. And then, in this fit of total paranoia, he slaughters the innocent family of his rival, Macduff. Each murder is just another heavy, heavy block, pushing that foundation deeper and deeper into the quicksand. But you can't just bury that kind of guilt. The quicksand starts to rise. At a huge royal banquet, Macbeth is totally haunted by the ghost of Banquo, a phantom that only he can see. He's literally arguing with an empty chair. It's this terrifying sign of the psychological cracks that are starting to show. Now, here's another way to look at it. Maybe this isn't a supernatural haunting at all. Maybe it's a complete psychological collapse. See, he wanted the power of a strong man, but he just couldn't shake the conscience of a weak one. The ghost isn't real. It's just the architect being tormented by his own flawed design. But Macbeth, he is so convinced his architectural plans are foolproof, all because of those final prophecies from the witches. He's totally ignoring the deep cracks forming all around him. He just can't see that his whole project is on the verge of catastrophic failure. His first big pillar of security was this promise that none of woman born could ever harm him. He thought it was this unbreakable shield. But, surprise, it turns out to be a loophole in the fine print. His enemy, Macduff, reveals he was delivered by cesarean section, so technically not born in the conventional way. Whoops. And his second so-called guarantee? He was told he was safe until Birnam Wood itself moved to his castle. I mean, that's impossible, right? But then, an approaching army uses branches from that very forest as camouflage, and suddenly it looks like the woods are literally marching on him. His second pillar just crumbles to dust. So, with both of his unbreakable defenses just gone, the failed architect is totally exposed and vulnerable. He gets overthrown by Macduff, and his entire monument to ambition, the whole thing built on blood and guilt, is left in absolute ruins. So, now that the dust has settled on all this wreckage, what are we supposed to learn from it? What does this colossal failure of architecture and morality really tell us? This really lays out the two ways you can judge the project. There's the Olympian view, which sees it as a classic tragedy. Ambition leads to unnatural deeds. Violence creates more violence. It's a classic moral warning. But then you have the Mephistophelian view, which sees it more as a failure of nerve. He had the guts to destroy the old rules, but he just didn't have the psychological strength to create new ones and actually live with what he'd done. In the end, you know who gives the harshest final verdict on this whole project? The architect himself. He admits his life's work, his grand tower of ambition, it all amounted to nothing more than a chaotic, meaningless story, a complete and utter failure. And this right here, this gets to the absolute heart of his failure. He was brave enough to tear down the whole moral structure of his world, to murder a king and defy all order. But he couldn't stand the psychological emptiness, the void that came after. He was still a slave to the very guilt he tried so hard to get rid of. So ultimately, that tower was never a monument to greatness. It was a ruin from the very beginning. It stands as a warning about the incredible arrogance of building a future on an unstable foundation if you don't have the genuine strength to create and actually endure a truly new world.